Holiday Guru's Gurucast.
There are many points in your life where you may feel flat, lacking inspiration, and generally stuck in a rut. Often, the biggest obstacle that you face to get out of this frame of mind is yourself. But it may just be that some form of outside inspiration helps you to climb those hurdles that exist between you and a sense of fulfillment that you've only ever dreamed of. Today's episode of the Gurucast aims to hopefully be that inspiration. Hello, my name is Martin McKenna and welcome to this week's episode of the Gurucast. As always, I'm joined by two co-presenters in Ella Carroll and Shane Clark who are primed and ready to inspire. How are you guys?
Very well, delighted to be here as always.
Yeah, really good. I'm really looking forward to this episode. The guy we're interviewing today, he's like a massive inspiration for me to really kind of get out there and push through whatever kind of limits I place on myself, you know?
Excellent stuff. And that is often the case with travel, that the biggest obstacle that you put in front of that trip that may change a lifetime is yourself. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Just that's what they say, isn't it? It's like the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, you know?
Excellent and very profound, Shane. Okay, so just before we get into the first section, just to give you a rundown, Ella's going to be bringing us into a world that maybe we may not know so much about. It's a lesser-known Scandinavian gem. I'll leave the surprise as to where exactly it is for Ella to break herself. We'll be joined by, as Shane already alluded to, a man named Damian Browne to discuss his incredible feat of rowing solo across the Atlantic. Finally, Shane will be delighting us once more with his ever-popular weekly top 5. So let's get the show on the road with Ella's Where To, How To.
Where to, how to.
So as Martin's just alluded to, I'll be looking at I think out of all the places that I've been looking to sort of travel to in my life, it's probably the most obscure place that I've been to, or will be going to even. Myself, I'm planning a holiday to Sweden this summer, but because I have quite a lot of time, I was looking into sort of day trips from the capital that I could do. And this one little place definitely caught my eye, and I think the opportunities was just too good to pass up, you know. If you can somehow guess where this place is, then I'll give you top brownie points for that, because this place is this very, very small group of islands and they're wedged right in between Sweden and Finland. They're sort of like a geographical and cultural bridge between the two countries, and it's essentially its own sort of independent state. The place is called Åland, and it's Finland's smallest province, but it has its own constitution, or the people speak Swedish. They have its own flag, which is like a combination of Sweden's and Finland's flag. So it is totally like its own little thing. And if you're going to Stockholm and you've got loads of time and you want to go on a day trip somewhere and really discover some beautiful nature that is, very much off the beaten track, this is the place to go. There are over nearly 7,000 islands and skerries, and there's only just under 30,000 people living there. So you can imagine, you can really sense how small this place is. And that 30,000 people, they only live on the 60 out of those 7,000 islands. So it's very, very small, very cozy little place.
You could literally have one island for every 4 people if you really wanted to.
Yeah, pretty much.
You could claim your own island.
Have your own little empire going. It's a lovely place. You can imagine the landscapes. These are islands that, if you've ever been to Stockholm and you see all the islands there, it's very similar to Åland. They all used to be carved by glaciers, and you'll find a lot of lovely little rocky beaches and really cute little houses everywhere, very lush countryside, and it's you can cycle around it dead easy. It's so flat. You can hire a bike for about, I think, 14 euros for the day, and you can get from one end to the other in a few hours, or there's ferries that will take you to sort of the more remote islands. And it's from Stockholm, it's dead easy to get to, and I'll explain a little later how to do that if you are interested.
We hope you are.
What is there to see in Åland? The capital, the main town of Åland is called Mariehamn, and it's probably where most ferry crossings go to because it's where the most people live. It's very small, but it's definitely high up on the charm factor. You can imagine those really colourful wooden houses by the sea. You can get your ice cream in the summer and have a little walk about. Lots of cafes. And because Åland is a very sort of, its history is connected with sort of shipping and maritime history and all of that. So if you're into the history, then I definitely recommend checking out the Åland Maritime Museum. And the interesting thing about this place is that it has one of only 2 remaining pirate flags in the whole world, the proper Jolly Roger. Yeah, totally. Like skull and crossbones sites. There's only 2 in the world, and one of them is in Åland. So there you go. And obviously, like loads of cafes that you can have, like the very Swedish thing of having like a pastry and coffee. It's very nice in the summer. Probably the next most popular place to go is to the west of Åland, and this place is called Eckerö. And it's where all the Swedes and it's where all the Finnish people go to like stock up on their tans. Like you find a lot of people there just chilling out at the beach and sort of walking along the promenade, and you can rent little summer houses or boat houses, and you just spend a week there just chilling out to the max. And that's the lovely thing about Scandinavia, especially in the summertime. I know we associate it with like snow and those eternal nights in the winter, and it's all dark and like minus 40 degrees or whatever, but in the summertime it's like you can expect temperatures of like 25 degrees even, and it's sunny the whole time.
I actually never would have thought that, to be honest.
No, it's quite surprising when you tell people that. And another little interesting tidbit of history, if you don't mind. I said before that Åland is actually technically part of Finland, and Finland also used to be part of the Russian Empire at one point. So that would have made Åland like the westernmost frontier of the empire. And obviously, at the time, like this is like the early 19th century, I think, Russia were a big world superpower and they had loads of money and loads of land. So if you're an emperor, you'd want to show off your power to your neighbours, right? So you'd think maybe they'd build a fortress or like a palace or like a huge monument to themselves, but they didn't build that. They built a post office, but a really big post office, and
stamp collector.
And it's just ridiculous because it's totally like over. It almost looks like a palace. Like it's just so big, and it's so ridiculously like overkill. Because when you think about how few people live there, and suddenly they have this huge post. I don't know why, but it's still there.
Something like that could only exist in a place where you could maybe have like 4 people per island in a population of 30,000.
I don't know. I just feel like it has its own little charm to it.
They've got the market cordoned on large post offices anyway.
It's still there today. Actually, you can visit it. It has a little cafe and a museum inside. And if you're into sort of looking at very big stamp collections, then by all means, go ahead. There is actually a proper castle there as well called Castelholm, which is very picturesque and lots of rivers and ponds nearby. It's all very nice. And another cool thing about Åland is they have a concept called the every man's right, and you'll find this across Scandinavia, like pretty much in all countries. And this essentially means that you can camp anywhere you want. Obviously, like not in someone's garden, so like, you can't turn up uninvited and just pitch a tent.
Take the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. But you can literally camp pretty much anywhere you want. If it's public land, you don't need a permit. You can just go out and pitch a tent. And what this means is that in Åland, there's nothing stopping you from sort of hiring a kayak and going to like one of these uninhabited islands and having it all to yourself for a few days. And you can pitch up your tent, get cooking, watch all the sunsets or the sunrise. Maybe you'll get like a visit from a moose or something. Just like, just take life very slow and just relax.
Getting back in touch with nature and stuff.
Yeah, and this, Scandinavia is all about that feeling of coziness and just enjoying the little things in life. And you'll definitely notice that in Åland.
Nice one.
Awesome.
There you go. And getting there from Stockholm, I always forgot. It is like, obviously, ferry crossings can take a long time, but it's possible to do it as a day trip. I myself have... there is a company called Eckerö Lines where you get the bus to a town just north of Stockholm, take the ferry across, and then you have a few hours to explore the islands, and then you'll be back in Stockholm for the evening. So I think it's probably like a 12-hour round trip. So definitely if you have a spare day in your itinerary and you don't really know what to do with yourself and you kind of want to get away from the whole sort of hustle and bustle of inner cities, then this is definitely a top choice that I can recommend.
Excellent stuff, Ella. Just for a little bit of context for people, I've known, people my entire life or whatever, and I've never seen anyone with such an affinity towards the place as Ella has for Scandinavia. And when she was, when we were doing a bit of research for this section for this week,
oh God,
as soon as the idea of Sweden came about, it was Ella's face lit up from ear to ear. So
I really didn't know which country because there's so many places to choose from. It's a big place. And then
you may as well start at the place that's closest to your heart anyway.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for this week's installment of Where to How to, and let's get on to our interview with Damian Browne. Okay, so for today's interview, we lined up a chat with a man who has on more than one occasion shown the world the epitome of mental strength and physical endurance. A career change during the course of a person's life is something that wouldn't be so uncommon, but this particular career change probably stands out for more than a couple of reasons. Here's Shane to tell us a little more.
People often look forward to retirement because they get a chance to relax and look back on the achievements of their careers. This is perhaps even more true for sports people. Our guest today played professional rugby to a high level for nearly 16 years, and instead of taking the traditional route of retirement, he chose a path much less travelled. We were delighted to say that we were speaking to the amazing Damian Browne on the podcast today.
Damian Browne, thank you so much for joining us today. First and foremost, there may be some people listening to this interview who would not know your background. And if I was hoping if you could maybe start off by explaining a little bit about yourself and your career, and then, go from there.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for having me, firstly. So I'm from the west of Ireland, Galway, and I was lucky enough to come straight out of school into professional rugby as an 18-year-old. I started with my local club, Galwegians, and turned professional at 19 with Connacht Rugby. And I was very privileged to have a 16-year career in rugby where I played for 5 different clubs, 2 Irish clubs, Connacht and Leinster, a club in England called Northampton Saints, and then I played 5 years in total in France. 3 years for a club called Brive and 2 years for a club called Oyonnax. So, I simply retired in 2015, and since then I've been just, how do I explain it? Doing these adventures and travels and challenges that I always wanted to do, and doing a little bit of charity work on the side or along with them. So, I suppose that sums it up pretty well anyway.
That's amazing stuff. And could I just ask a question in relation to how you got into those kind of ultra endurance kind of events? So how was it to go from, say, a team sport where the emphasis is on size and power to a sport that requires like long hours of solitude and training and endurance, for things like, like you did the Marathon des Sables, I know, and things like that?
Yeah, because of firstly, what I would say is that I coming from a team environment, having been in a team and very invested in that environment, I consider myself a decent team member, and I know how a team works. I know like the dynamics of it and the kind of psychology behind it all. So, or I think I do anyway. So I was kind of very conscious that I didn't have a lot to learn by kind of continuing in that space. So I was always very attracted to the solo kind of adventure. I travel a lot on my own, mostly because nobody wants to come with me to the places I go to. But getting into these ultra endurance events, they kind of stem from training for rugby and the reward I get from preparing for something very in a lot of detail and very diligently, and then going to try and achieve that. What I will say is that I have to tailor my programs because of my profile. I'm a pretty big guy, like 6'5", 19 stone. So, for me, for example, with the Marathon des Sables, a classic marathon or ultra marathon or marathon training program would have left me in bits. I would have been in a worse place getting to the start line than I would have even before starting the program. So I have to be very smart in how I put together my programs, or very kind of very conscious of my profile and what's going on with my joints. A lot of my joints are very compromised from 16 years of rugby, so I wouldn't have gone down the classic route. Basically, I would have trained in a different way, found a way to get that volume without doing the kind of hours and hours and hours of kind of classic marathon training that will just load up already poor joints and poor movement patterns.
And can I ask then, off the back of that rugby career, was that desire to travel kind of only fulfilled once you finished, or was that something that was always present during your 16 years of playing?
No, always present. The minute I had any sort of time off, you'd find me at an airport somewhere. I'd be, if it was only a 3 or 4 day break that we'd had from the club, I might just go home to Ireland if I was away. But later in my career, any sort of time off over 7 days or 7 days and over, I'd have a trip planned well in advance, and I'd use it as something to look forward to, obviously, because there's a lot of pressure in the rugby environment. You're in a bit of a goldfish bowl, so that would be a kind of something for me to aim for, something to get to during the season, if you understand what I'm saying. I just it kind of evolved from that. My character is one that pushes it myself. So even with my travels, I'm always kind of pushing myself, trying to do it raw, trying to do it in places where are quite hard to get to and daunting to go to.
That's amazing. So just getting on to your most recent feat. So not everyone wakes up like one day and decides to row across the Atlantic. So what inspired you to take this on?
The original information I had on the row was a book I read by James Cracknell and Ben Fogle called The Crossing. They did the row, the transatlantic row from the Canary Islands to, I think it was Barbados at the time, but they did that in 2005, and must have been the year after I read the book. So that was kind of the original inspiration. And there and then, like mid-book even, I knew I would do it someday. I knew it was for me. These kind of, everything about it appealed, the adventure, the challenge, the extremes, and the journey itself. So I kind of always had it in my head. I wrote it down as well in a kind of, I suppose, for want of a better expression, a bucket list. And that I would do it, and from time to time I'd come back to it and I think about it often, and you're put under a lot of kind of pressure to think about what you want to do after rugby while you're playing. So for me, I wasn't thinking about jobs or security. I was thinking about travels and adventures and things that really appealed to me. So, the minute rugby was finished, I started cracking into that list of things that I kind of put together while I was playing and dreamt about. The first one was the Marathon des Sables, like you mentioned, and then the second one was the ocean row.
Amazing. And what kind of training was involved in preparation for the row?
So I started 588 days before the start of the row. That was the day I paid my entrance fee and committed to attempting to try and row the Atlantic. So again, I had to be conscious of my profile. So I'd done a lot of strength work. A lot of it was stuff that you might do preparing for rugby, so you're trying to get fit for purpose. And for an ocean row, you have to be big. It's ideal that you're big and strong and have some level of endurance. So, I just tried to get in the best kind of shape possible. So I kind of tried to peak come November 2017 and peak in my fitness standards, like my rowing interval standards, and peak in my strength standards. So I was really happy with where I was at physically and mentally as well. A lot of my mental training is tied in with my physical side, so it was long, it was arduous, there was ups and downs because it was 18 months of training, and I'd never prepared for a singular thing in such a long period. So there was a lot of learnings involved and adaptations, but where I got to at the end was a place I was really happy with.
You mentioned earlier on there about how your preparation for a rugby game was similar to your preparation for the rowing challenge which you undertook. A lot of the time when you're playing these team sports, it can be kind of a team mentality that gets you over the line, and I'm sure when you were taking this row on that you did come across your own obstacles and your own stumbling blocks, and I'm just kind of wondering what was your biggest stumbling block and how did you maybe get over them?
I was my own worst enemy most of the time, because the standards I set myself, and I was trying to adhere to those standards while I was under, serious kind of physical discomfort, bordering on pain at times. But it's while I was out there, I kind of had some issues on day one in particular. That was probably the hardest day. Kind of everything that could go wrong went wrong. So I had seasickness, which was kind of I had prepared for mentally, but when you throw in that along with basically severe cramping like I've never had in my lower body, my calves, hammies, quads were just bouncing, and I mean just really, really painful. And then all the calluses on my hands tore off, my heels blistered, and then I had the psychological battle of being pushed back by headwinds because we got a localized low pressure, and then we hit these winds, and an ocean rowing boat's going pretty slow at the best of times. So the minute you start hitting headwinds, it's a real struggle, and got blown back a mile towards the island while I tried to get a little bit of rest because I was going nowhere. Made that mile up and then put out a thing called the power anchor, which is it's a parachute that sits under the water like an anchor and holds about 2 tons of it, 2 tons of water in it. And even when I had that out, I got pushed back, which was a huge psychological blow because that's the thing you have to really rely on, especially when you're faced with storms out in the middle of the Atlantic. So I had all this going on in my head, and then seeing the same point on the GPS 3 times while you're in, while you're shook a little bit by what's happening to your body. So it was just trying to process everything really quickly and trying to get some kind of recovery in place while still fighting a bit of ground. So thankfully I put in a kind of 7-hour straight stint on the oars the morning of day 2. That just did enough, I think, to get me out of those headwinds. And later on that evening, I picked up some tailwinds, and then I was gone. But there was 2 other solos who never got away from that headwinds. They had to abandon the race on day 3 and day 4. So, just having that little bit of kind of determination and resilience, to just not kind of, feel sorry for yourself and just grab the oars and get to work, paid big dividends and may well have saved my race.
Yeah, that's amazing stuff, Damian. So you've described there the kind of lows that you experienced. Can you even attempt to describe the feeling that you had when you made land at the end of the row?
I can try, but even now I'm not sure I know exactly what I felt. It was just such an amazing feeling, been kind of reunited with parents, brother, sister, friends who had come all the way over to Antigua to welcome me in. You use those, like I've seen a lot of over the years watching the race, I've seen a lot of images of rowers coming in and they're really emotional, and you use those images, and while you're out there, while you're suffering and going through the really dark times, but when you actually get there, it's you just can't compare it to anything or you've gone through before. It's a relief, and then there's this huge kind of just wave of noises and emotions, and it's pretty special thing to be able to share with people close to you who've nearly rode with you to a certain extent. When I think of my parents and what they must have gone through in the 63 days I was out there. So to be reunited with them was very special.
I can imagine when you are from a sporting background like yourself and you do have a mindset, which you do, the goal or the target would be to attempt to recreate that type of emotion and that type of experience upon completion. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that you have planned in the near future in terms of endurance pursuits which we can follow or which we can track you?
Well, I definitely had a lot of time to think about things while I was out there, and there's an amount of stuff that popped into my head. I kind of, when I retired at 35, I gave myself kind of 5 years to pursue these things. So I've kind of got, 2 years and a bit left, and some of the stuff I want to do, we're not sure I'll squeeze them in, but I want to get some of the 7 summits, the highest mountains on each continent, done and attempted at least. So I'm hoping to get up. Well, I'm hoping to attempt to get up Elbrus this summer. I'm going up Damavand in Iran next month, hopefully, which is the highest mountain outside the Himalayas in Asia. And there was a few other things on there, like I'd like to try and cycle the Pan American Highway from the top of Alaska to the bottom of Argentina. Now that might take nearly 2 years in itself, so I'd say I might be pushing past my 40th birthday on that one. But I have lots of exciting things planned, lots of exciting things in my head. I haven't committed to any of them yet because I just need to hold off and just get some questions answered, and then make a commitment, and then I'll be kind of all in on it, But it's definitely there's definitely some good stuff in the future in the pipeline. And yeah,
excellent. It's been a pleasure following your journey. I was kind of tracking your progress during the course of your trip, and who would doubt you from achieving those goals that you're setting for yourself now. Thank you so much for joining us today, Damian Browne. That's all we have time for, and best of luck with you in the future.
Okay, thanks, Damian.
Thanks very much.
And now, this week's Holiday Guru Top 5.
Okay, so this week, as inspired by the absolutely amazing Damian Browne, I've come to you with the top 5 longest foot races in the world. So, without further ado, here's number 5. I've got the Jungle Ultra. This race covers 142.6 miles through the Peruvian jungle, exploring the cloud forest and dropping 10,500 feet to the base of the jungle floor. Runners cross 70 rivers and streams as they contend with whatever creatures they come across. Number 4, we've got the Self-Transcendence Run. Okay, so this is a little bit different. Runners cover 3,100 miles in 52 days by running exactly 5,649 laps around one block in Queens, New York, passing the same playground, ball fields, and high schools, all on punishing concrete. Successful runners must cover about 60 miles a day, and it's absolutely insane, but some people actually do it.
The ultimate grind.
Yeah, for sure. Number 3, we've got the Dragon's Back Race. So this isn't that remote. This actually happens in Wales. So it calls itself the toughest 5-day mountain running race in the world. The course is through the mountainous spine from North Wales to South Wales. It's 186 miles long and requires a 51,000 foot climb on a course often with no trails. So you have to negotiate it yourself. Number 2, we've got the 6633 Arctic Ultra. The Arctic Ultra is known as one of the hardest, coldest, windiest, and longest foot races humans have ever undertaken. The recently completed 2017 version was only the 9th time it's been held. Competitors must support themselves over 120 or 350 miles. It's their choice. Both of which cross into the Arctic Circle, which it actually goes at the 23rd mile. You go 66 degrees 33 minutes, so that's where they get the 66:33. But you have to take your pack with everything, and it's crazy. And then number 1, we've got the Barkley Marathons. The Barkley Marathons is approximately a 100-mile race held in Frozen Head State Park in Tennessee. Runners have 60 hours to complete it. Only 40 runners can compete each year and do so on an off-changing course. Runners do 5 laps of approximately 20 miles through the wilderness, and the unique thing is that they pick up pages that are hidden around the course to prove that they actually did it.
God, it's like a treasure hunt.
People can actually get lost completely, and it's not even the fact that fatigue gets to them, that they just lose their way completely and have to give up.
It sounds like the worst
like the beginning
story.
to like a horror film.
Yeah. But there you have it. Those are some of the toughest and longest foot races in the world, proving that people will go to. There's no length that people will go to punish themselves.
And just as a starting point, maybe next time you have the choice between taking an elevator and taking the stairs, take the stairs. Take the stairs. Okay, Shane, thank you so much for another fantastic top 5. I look forward to hearing the next one. Just in terms of this show, if this show were the Atlantic Ocean, then Sebastian Weber, our sound engineer, would be our boat. Thank you so much again for helping us out on sound. Ella and Shane, thank you as always for the insights that you've given this week.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks for your excellent hosting.
As always, thank you.
Excellent stuff. I really appreciate the compliments. So we will be back next week with another installment of Holiday Gurus Gurucast. Have a nice weekend. Make the most of it. Do something new. And thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.
Peace out.
Thank you. Bye.